Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this centenary event to mark women voting for the first time in the general election on the 14th of December 1918. I want you to picture what British suffragettes who campaigned on a platform of the rights of women to vote in public elections, women's suffrage, would think if they could see the UK of 2018. Tonight, Ros Curry, the curator of the Islington Museum, is going to tell us how the suffragettes, and in particular the Jewish suffragettes, the BlackGuards in Bonnets, achieved their aim of female suffrage. She is the Islington Museum curator, has previously worked at Chertsey Museum, the Fusilier Museum, the National Maritime Museum, the Jewish Military Museum and the Jewish Museum. She obtained her first degree at Cambridge University in Archaeology and Natural Sciences, and has master's degrees from SAIS in Art and Archaeology and from Cambridge and from University College London in Museum Studies. At the Jewish Museum, she curated the For King and Country, the Jewish Experience of the First World War exhibition. We shall hear tonight about inspirational leaders motivating a mass movement and in the end achieving their goals.
Thank you. Gosh, there's lots of lights on me now. To get used to it. Hello everyone.
Hello.
Welcome. Tonight I'm going to talk about BlackGuards in Bonnets. And I don't know if any of you saw the exhibition I did on this in March 2015. One of the things that I found most interesting was the intertwining of the fight for equality both within British society and within the Jewish community. And that's really what I'll be talking about tonight. And the fact that Jewish women were involved all over the shop, from tea parties, to plays, to hunger striking, and disrupting a Yom Kippur service in 1913, who are the BlackGuards in Bonnets. So they really did everything along the whole spectrum. And tonight I'll be talking about just some of the Jewish suffragettes, because there's so many, it's quite difficult to talk about them all, and also we don't always know. More recently, as you'll have seen from my first slide, I've been working on Holloway Prison, where many of the suffragettes were actually held. So kind of my previous interest and my current interest really intertwine, but I'll talk a bit more about that later. So when we start, the first important thing to say is to talk about the men, obviously, and Jewish men, and most men, couldn't actually vote at the beginning of the 19th century. So we're not starting from a point where all men can vote and women can't vote. That's not the situation at all. This is a cartoon from the Jewish Museum from the 1830s, and Daniel O'Connell is saying to the Jewish man just looking through the door, "Agitate, friend Moses, agitate," because the Catholics had just got the vote in 1829. So that's what you have to think about when it comes to Jewish people getting the vote. Actually, Jewish men didn't have the vote. In 1850, as I'm sure you all know, David Salomons was elected as MP for Greenwich. He took his seat but wouldn't take the Christian oath of allegiance, and so was fined by the law courts, couldn't sit, went back, was elected again, and then he became Mayor of London. And in 1858, the Jewish Relief Act allowed Jewish men to serve in Parliament. So that was kind of step towards men being able to vote. By the end of the 19th century, I've got a little graph, different reform acts had given the vote to 60% of men over the age of 21, which included Jewish men. And Jewish men could be barristers, take a degree at university, and serve in the armed forces. And the first Jewish chaplain was appointed in 1890, I think, if I can remember that. One of the really interesting things, the 1832 Act was actually the first one to specify that women couldn't vote. And a woman called Mary Smith petitioned that spinsters should be allowed to vote, because otherwise spinsters didn't have any say. Well, you can imagine that married women could persuade their husbands what to vote for, but it was completely disallowed. So by 1884, the Third Reform Act, most Jewish men, a lot of Jewish men anyway, could vote, those who held property. But the position of Jewish women hadn't changed much at all. As you probably know, at that time as an immigrant group, Jewish people were not had lower social standing than the establishment, those who controlled Britain, and women were in a lesser position than men. Another thing that many Jewish women were uncomfortable with was their position within the Jewish community and sometimes in synagogue as well. And it's kind of from both these pushes, both the position of Jewish people in society and within the Jewish community, that Jewish women started to join others to fight for the vote, particularly in the face of Parliament basically ignoring women, overruling amendments, and doing their very best to not let women even have a say in whether they were allowed to vote or not. Now, one of the first Jewish campaigners for the vote that we know of was Lady Goldschmidt, and she was an early campaigner for women's rights, particularly in the education of women. She stopped mid-century trying to push for the vote because she decided that women weren't going to get the vote in the near future, and it was better to push for women to get good educations. And she focused on university education in particular. This is Goethe College in Cambridge. In about, I've not got it written down, I think it was about 1890 that women were allowed to take the exams at Cambridge. Women had been allowed to go to Cambridge before that, but they weren't allowed to take the exams, so you couldn't get the degree, and that was the kind of thing she was fighting for. Women had been trying to petition to fight for the vote from 1832, from that first petition, and all through the 19th century. But it was in 1897 the National Union of Women's Suffrage Societies, under Millicent Fawcett, brought together all the different groups fighting for the vote. And I think this kind of tree of the National Union of Women's Suffrage Societies just shows how many different groups there were, all fighting for the vote, how impassioned people were, that there were local groups everywhere, and they all came under this umbrella. And the other thing to note, and you've got to think about this the whole way through when you're thinking about suffrage, suffragists, suffragette societies, is most people belong to lots of them. So it wasn't like you just chose one, you belonged to quite a few, which is why it gets so complicated, because there were loads of different smaller organisations which all work together. Now, the National Union of Women's Suffrage Societies favoured peaceful protests to prove that women were responsible enough to get the vote, because that was one of the main arguments, that women weren't responsible enough to vote to have that privilege. Dora Montefiore was another early campaigner, kind of at the turn of the century. She was widowed, and she discovered she got no guardian right to her children, which meant that she had no right to have her children with her, to keep her children. She was absolutely horrified on this, and that is when she started getting politicised. That was in Australia. She came back to Britain, and during the Boer War, a war which she said, a war in the making of which I had no voice, she refused to pay income tax as a protest. Why should she pay tax when she wasn't able to vote for the decision? So this slogan, taxation without representation is tyranny, which you might recognise from the American Revolution, from the British Civil War, also was used by women fighting for the vote. And in 1906, she barricaded herself in her house, refusing to pay income tax, because she'd refused to pay income tax before in 1904 and 1905, and the bailiffs had come and taken all auction, and she went and bought back some of the stuff that she really liked. But she decided by not letting the bailiffs in, it would make a much bigger splash. And so this was the siege of Fort Montefiore, and the problem is that all these women is they write in great long paragraphs, so it's difficult to read a little pithy bit to kind of get what they're saying, but I'll find a bit. As is well known, bailiffs are only allowed to enter through the ordinary doors. They may not climb in at a window, and at certain hours they may not even attempt an entrance. So she just closed the door to the bailiff and stopped them coming in. And then the WSPU, which we're going to talk about in a minute, decided if she did her share of passive resistance, they would hold daily demonstrations outside the house as long as the bailiff was excluded, and do all in their power outside to make the sacrifice that I was making of value to the cause. So this is her at her door, not opening it to the bailiffs, and all the suffragettes are like protesting in the road in front, and she had a beautiful big road. So at evening demonstrations, rows of lamps were hung along the top of the walls and against the houses, and on the little terrace in the front garden hung during the whole time of the siege a red banner with the letters painted in white: women should vote for the laws they obey and the taxes they pay. So that was Dora. She was involved with the early WSPU, which I'm about to talk about, but she left in 1907 to fight for full suffrage, which is again one of these changes that happens when people join one society, but then their position changes and she decided that she wanted to fight for everyone to get the vote. So in 1903, just before Dora was standing on her doorstep being in a siege, the Women's Social Political Union was formed by Emmeline Pankhurst, and really it was formed because they were just so fed up of not getting anywhere. There was almost certainly by that point a majority of support in Parliament. People actually thought probably women should have the vote, but the ruling Liberal Party wouldn't let any vote go through. I mean, we don't know that, but that's what people feel. They wouldn't let a vote go through. So they founded this organisation which was meant to play a more active role in getting the vote. And that doesn't mean they were just violent. They held mass rallies, protest meetings, held loads and loads of talks, and marched to Parliament and demand their right to petition the King. Their colours were purple for dignity, white for purity, and green for hope, although some people say something else, but that's normally what I've heard. And Jewish women took an active role from the very beginning, from fundraising, rallies, and arson and window breaking. So they were represented in every stage. The Lowy family is one of those families. These are a wealthy Jewish family who helped bankroll the WSPU activities. That's Henrietta Lowy in the middle in a rather magnificent hat. And this is at the fundraising tea at Prince's Skating Rink. And they had this special china made for the event, which you can now buy, which is very, very expensive to buy now. But it's kind of interesting how well branded they were. And this is their band. They had a marching band for the WSPU. So I think one of the things people don't realise about the WSPU, they were this massive, really organised organisation. It wasn't just smashing windows. And Henrietta Lowy and her husband were helping bankroll the whole lot. In 1910 came Black Friday. Black Friday was a day when, given Prime Minister Asquith's refusal to even meet any women, to let any pro-suffrage bills go through, they formed a deputation to Parliament. Henrietta Lowy was part of the deputation who went to Parliament. This is her deputation ribbon, you can see. And they met a solid line of police and police brutality. Some of them were assaulted, some of them were sexually assaulted, and didn't get anywhere. They couldn't get past this line of police. And many of them were arrested and sent to prison, to Holloway Prison. Now, this is the original Holloway Prison. The original prison was built by the City of London in the 1830s on land which, it was opened in 1852, but it was on land bought in the 1830s for the cholera epidemic to bury people on, but not that many people died, so they just had this land, so they put the prison on it. At the beginning of the 20th century, the majority of women held there. Oh, it became women's own prison in 1902. That's relevant. The majority of the women held there at the beginning of the 20th century were the homeless, the poor, the vulnerable, rather like the people who are in our prisons today. For example, many were alcoholic, many had mental illnesses, many were prostitutes, and the majority were working class. So from 1906, suddenly all of these women were coming in, and the first woman to be imprisoned for criminal damage, she was imprisoned in Holloway, and her fine was paid. She was really annoyed because she was released just about straight away because her fine was paid for her, so she got released. But the governor of the time said, because many of them were more educated than some of the other women who'd been there, and they were shocked at the conditions in this prison, and the governor said that the prison was not for women like them or women of their class, which is quite interesting. Dora Montefiore said, cells had a cement floor, whitewashed walls and a window high up so that one could not see out of it. It was barred outside and the glass was corrugated so that one could not even get a glimpse of the sky. And the only sign of outside life was the occasional flicker of the shadow of a bird as it flew outside across the window. One of the challenges with being held as a suffragette at Holloway Prison is many of them were imprisoned as second division prisoners, not as political prisoners. And they weren't allowed to talk to each other, they had specified clothes they were allowed to wear, they had a limited number of visitors, and many of them felt actually they should be political prisoners, and they therefore went on hunger strike. the first woman to go on hunger strike. She just did it off her own bat. It wasn't a grand plan. She decided to go on hunger strike to protest her rights in prison. And after that, many more of them did. This picture of a cell on the left is actually a mock-up that the Women's Social and Political Union made. Because, as I said, they were really good at branding and propaganda. So they made fake prison clothes and a fake cell so that they could take it round to exhibitions and show how badly they were being treated. And actually, them being sent to prison was very good in terms of publicity. And getting force-fed, in many ways, was also very good. Gertrude and Ethel Lowy, who were the daughters of Henrietta, were both in Holloway prison. Gertrude Lowy received this medal, it's a hunger strike medal, because part of the story of the WSPU was that they were fighting in an army and they were getting rewarded. So a medal for the amazing things that they had undertaken in the name of the cause kind of makes sense. So this is the hunger strike medal. And what happened essentially was women would refuse to eat, and after a few days they would be force-fed. And I've got a description from Sylvia Pankhurst of being force-fed, which I won't read all of because it's horrible, but I think it's just good to kind of think about what it actually meant. On the morning of the third day, I was taken out into the corridor to be weighed, and sometime afterwards the doctors came to my cell to sound my heart. They said, "Will you eat your food?" And I said, "No." Then we only have one alternative: to feed by force. I was trembling with agitation, feverish with fear and horror, determined to fight with all my strength. I did not know what to do. And then the people come in to hold her down while she's being force-fed. I struggled as hard as I could, but they were six, and each one of them were much bigger and stronger than I. They had me on the bed and firmly held me down by the shoulders, the arms, the knees, and the ankles. The doctors came stealing in behind. Someone seized me by the head and thrust a sheet under my chin. I felt a man's hand trying to force my mouth open, and a steel gag running around my gums and feeling for gaps in my teeth. I felt I should go mad. I felt like a poor wild thing caught in a steel trap. I was tugging at my head to get it free, then two of them holding it. My breath was coming faster and with a sort of low scream that was getting louder. Then I felt a steel instrument pressing against my gums, cutting into the flesh, forcing its way in. And basically they pried her jaws apart and put an India rubber tube down her throat, and then they poured milk or bread and milk or eggs down, and they would feed them 3 times a day, every day. There wasn't any let-up. And she says, my mouth got more and more hurt. My gums, where they pried them open, were always bleeding, and other parts of my mouth got pinched and bruised. I mean, it was properly grim, and I think we need to remember that. It wasn't just a publicity stunt. And because it was so grim, and because these accounts are being published in the papers, that's where, again, the WSPU, I would say propaganda, but that's not really the right word, kind of publicity train got going. And it was in the papers, and people were horrified. And that's where the cat and mouse came out. So it was officially called the Temporary Discharge for Ill Health Act. It wasn't called the Cat and Mouse Act. And the idea was that if someone went on hunger strike and got really ill, they would be released, and then when they got better again, they'd be rearrested and put back in prison. And it was called the Cat and Mouse Act for the idea of a cat playing with its prey, letting it get away and then getting it again. They actually formed, the WSPU formed a bodyguard, including Edith Garrett, who was an Islington suffragette, not a Jewish suffragette, who was a jiu-jitsu expert, and she trained the bodyguard in jiu-jitsu so that they could repel police people who were trying to arrest suffragettes. So that was the Cat and Mouse Act. But that came in 1913, so that's Edith Garrett outwitting lots of police people. Mainly policemen, aren't they? Looking quite scared. That's from Punch. Another Jewish suffragette who is probably my favourite because she's from Harrogate and Leeds, which is where I'm from. So I really like her. And she was properly feisty. She saw her mother was widowed, head of the household, unable to vote, and she thought that was astonishing and wrong. So she joined the Leeds Women's Social and Political Union in 1909 and it became very active. She was imprisoned in 1911 in Holloway Prison for throwing a rubber at a government building. But her most famous act came when she filed down an iron bar, smuggled it in her handbag into the Tower of London and smashed the case which held the crown jewels. Round the bar was a piece of paper saying, "Jewel House, Tower of London, my protest to the government for its refusal to enfranchise women but continue to torture women. Deeds, not words, Leonora Cohen." And then it also said, "Votes for women, 100 years of constitutional petition, resolutions, meetings, processions has failed." And you can actually, if you go to Leeds Museum, you can see that bar, which was quite exciting when I went to see it a few years ago. She made this dress on the right as well, this beautiful dress, for the Leeds Art Club Ball in 1914. Now, for some Jewish women, the thought of joining this quite militant, quite angry, quite politicised organisation wasn't so appealing. And in 1912, the Jewish League of Women's Suffrage formed. So there were many religious leagues, actually. There were lots and lots of different Christian leagues. The Jewish League was somewhat modelled on that, somewhat part of that kind of grouping of religious suffrage organisations. It was founded by women including Henrietta and Caroline Franklin. Netta particularly was very active in lots of liberal and feminist causes, and her sister was Lily Montagu, who was looking at reforming British Judaism at the same time, looking at expanding the horizons of British Jewish people and working out how to improve people's lives in terms of fighting against unemployment, sweatshops, and the founding of the West Central Jewish Girls Club. And from 1901, she was developing the development of liberal Judaism. But as part of that, actually, the Jewish League for Women's Suffrage really made sense, because it was all kind of much of a muchness, getting really fed up of the educational, civic and political limits on women. And that is why they founded it. Most Jewish members of the JLWS were also members elsewhere, so many were WSBU members, but others were for example, the Actress League for Suffrage and all sorts of things like that. They had two goals, and their goals were: one, to demand that women achieve equal franchise with men, and two, to improve the status of women in the Jewish community. So they were fighting both kind of within and without the Jewish community. They felt there was a strong religious and moral basis to enfranchisement, particularly for Jews who knew the evils of disenfranchisement more than most. And that's kind of a direct quote. They began in March 1913 to campaign for votes for women seat holders in synagogues, and by May 1914, 7 synagogues had passed resolutions in favour. So they were quite active and quite pushy. I mean, it got quite a long way quite quickly. Now, they were mainly law-abiding, but there were some more radical members. So this is the BlackGuards in Bonnets incident, where at a Yom Kippur service in October 1913 at the New West End Synagogue, 3 women interrupted the Yom Kippur service, shouting, "Votes for women," and "May God forgive Herbert Samuel and Sir Rufus Isaacs for denying freedom to women," both of whom were in the congregation. They were part of that. And "May God forgive them for consenting to the torture of women," which obviously referred to force feeding. In the East End of London, the League opened a branch to engage the more kind of recent migrant communities, which was quite tricky, as many of the migrants there weren't naturalised, so neither men nor women could vote anyway, and they were much more interested in, for example, working conditions and pay. This is a Yiddish flyer which was distributed in the East End in Whitechapel, October 1913, reading, "You don't believe in women's rights, but are you willing to hear the other side? Come to our office and consider why women want rights. Open air meeting every evening." And actually, when I was at the Jewish Museum, we bought this flyer for the Jewish Museum, so they hold this flyer now, which is really lovely. But it does tell that story of how they were trying to win over people's support by just holding lots of meetings, talking about it all over the place. Now, you might have noticed that even the Jewish League for Women's Suffrage was looking for women to achieve equal franchise with men, which is ignoring that group of men who still couldn't vote. That's where the East London Federation of Suffragettes come in, who campaigned for universal suffrage among the immigrants of the East End. And one of those campaigners was Minnie Lansbury, who was a suffragette who never went to prison during the suffragette years, but later, so she was daughter of a Jewish coal merchant from Stepney, And she was a really remarkable woman. She was one of the popular rape strikers in the 1920s, so she did actually end up in Holloway Prison. And she was very ill there and sadly died afterwards. Now, not everyone in the Jewish community was that pleased about all of these activities. And the fight for women's votes really split popular opinion. And many men and women were on one side, but many men and women were on the other side. You've probably seen loads of these propaganda postcards about what happens when women get the vote, which is obviously smoke, play cards, eat lots of chocolate and wear stripy stockings, while the man has to look after the baby in the background. Many felt that the drive for the vote was actually unfeminine, and women's emotional rather than logical natures posed a real danger to the country. If women got the vote, then what would happen? We'd be in ruins. And even before the JLWS did anything much, they were calling into question the Jewish press. So the idea of such a league is execrable. Only in the philosophy of fools can Judaism have any affinity with women's suffrage. This is from the letters page, this isn't the editorial. But nevertheless, this is the kind of thing that happened as soon as they formed. And they were really worried. The Jewish community in general was very worried that by sticking heads over the parapet, that Jewish suffragists and Jewish suffragettes would lose gains in equality made so far. In March 1912, the Jewish Chronicle reported that a WSPU window breaker had been described as a dirty little Jewess. And that was what they were really worried was going to happen. And they were talking about people like this, Elsa Myers. So she was a window breaker. She was a member of the Women's Social Political Union and the Jewish League for Women's Suffrage. She was a teacher, so it was really difficult for her to be an active fighter. But her school was closed for a month from March 1913, so she smashed a window in the War Office, was sentenced to 1 month's imprisonment under the name Marjorie Manners, went on hunger strike, was forcibly fed, and was released the morning her school reopened and went back to school, which I think is pretty impressive, really. But it's exactly the kind of person that some people in the Jewish community were really worried about. Another quote from the Jewish Chronicle relating to the interruption of the Yom Kippur service: "Their dastardly crimes in the cause of suffrage, quasi-demented creatures will go to any lengths in their madness." There were lots of people who supported them. Another letter in the Jewish Chronicle, which is kind of more positive: "Thank God that there are Jewesses who are suffering the personal, temporary physical degradation of prison, so as thereby to save thousands of women from permanent degradation and permanent constant ignominy," which is fantastic and I think reminds us how well people used to write in the past. Basically what it's saying is they're suffering in prison, they're suffering being degraded in order to save women from being degraded by not having their rights in society. Israel Zangwill was yet another person in the Jewish community who was vociferous in fighting for women in the vote. He shared a platform on many occasions with the Pankhursts, and there's this bit, which is just the beginning of one of his speeches. "The proposition that we are here to maintain is so simple, so clear, that when one is called upon to justify it, one scarcely knows what to say. The fact is, it is not our business to justify it. The onus of proof lies on the other side. How do they justify their monstrous proposition that one half of the human race shall have no political rights?" So you can see why the Pankhursts like him, because he was magnificent. The Zangwill family as a whole were actually involved, and Edith Zangwill's diary is held at the Jewish Museum, and she writes in it, "Ayrton, who's her son, has a way of suddenly getting on a stool and calling out 'Votes for women' with an emphatic throwing out of his arm. A few weeks ago, Israel met him coming down the middle of the village street, waving a large branch and uttering this cry." So obviously they're very active. He also said this: "Ladylike means are all very well if you were dealing with gentlemen, but you were dealing with politicians," which probably can't still today. Hugh Franklin, he was another one who was very active in his support of women, and allegedly he horsewhipped Churchill, although I haven't been able to find that many links on it. And Zangwill said, "I'm glad that Mr. Franklin is of my race. That may perhaps go some way to condone the sins of anti-suffragist Jews who have made ignoble use of the liberty we've so painfully won to crush the liberties of the next aspirant for freedom." And Leonora Cohen said, "My husband couldn't understand why certain women shouldn't have the vote. I had a good home, had a little son, was adored in the domestic sphere. Why did I want more? But he understood. Although one of his friends said, 'If I had a wife like yours, I should tie her to the table leg.'" On the outbreak of World War One, the suffrage movement was split again. As you can see, Millicent Fawcett said this: "Women, your country needs you. Let us show ourselves worthy of citizenship, whether our claim to it be recognised or not," which is very much in the line of the NUWS, which is showing that women are worthy of the right to vote. But the WSPU as well suspended its activities and threw its power behind the war effort and really started fighting for the vote. The Women's Freedom League and the East London Federation of Suffragettes, who I talked a little bit about, were both horrified that basically men were going to war and women were being employed in their place at half the wages. So that was a new fight that people were fighting. When the war finished, the Representation of the People Act gave the parliamentary vote to all men over 21 and most women over 30. 8.4 million women were eligible to vote. Women became nearly half the electorate. One of the things that people sometimes say is the reason that women over 30 were only allowed to vote was because if they'd given it to women over 21 as well, there would have been more women voting than men. We've got to face the facts that a lot of the men who came back from fighting in the First World War would not have had the vote. So one of the other reasons that they had to change the way of voting, all these men had been suffering in the trenches, giving their lives for the country, and then they come back and wouldn't actually have the right to vote. So it's a complicated story why the vote was given then, but I think we can understand. At the end, once this had happened, the Women's Social and Political Union felt their work was done, so they dissolved the organisation. Others began to shift their focus towards women's rights and fought more for equality beyond suffrage. In 1928, finally, women had the vote at the same age as men. So while we're all celebrating this year, maybe we shouldn't be celebrating as much for another 10 years. And Leonora Cohen said this in 1973. So Leonora Cohen lived till she was 105. "One hopes that women of the future will organise themselves into groups or unions and that they will use the vote intelligently to ensure that we have the very highest standard of womanhood." And I think that's something we can all really take to heart. I'm just going to talk a little bit more about Holloway Prison, because obviously during suffragette times you had all of these women held in the one on the right, not in the one on the left, held there. But actually, it wasn't the end of the story for Jewish women held at Holloway Prison. Actually, the first ever woman MP, Constance Markovich, was held at Holloway Prison when she was elected as MP, but because she was a Sinn Féin MP, she never sat in House of Parliament. During World War II, many Jewish women were again held at Holloway because they were German or Austrian refugees, being held there until they were taken to the internment camps on the Isle of Man. And it's one of the things that I found during this project that's most shocking, that, well, first of all, the women went in with their children, then questions were raised in the Houses of Parliament, and the children were taken away to children's homes, but nobody knew when they were moving on, so they didn't know when they were going to see their mothers again. And then, at the same time, under 18B defence regulations, fascists were also held at the prison. So you had Diana Mosley being held at the same time as all these German Jewish refugees, which is really quite shocking to think about. And many of them were held for several months, no idea when they were going to come out. And one of the things we have borrowed for our project on Holloway Prison is some letters from a woman who is now in her 80s, called Eva, but she was 8 when she was held in Holloway Prison and then was in a children's home. And her letters are just amazing, because she'd been in England for 2 years, so she's incredibly articulate, amazingly, in English. And she had to translate for the other children in the children's home. And she's just writing to her mother saying, "When are you coming out?" But it's the same experience of being in prison, not having any right of control over your life. Very finally, this project that I'm doing, I talked too fast again. This project that I'm doing about Holloway Prison is because it closed in July 2016. I am the curator at Islington. Holloway Prison is in Islington, the borough of Islington, and it is this remarkable place with these suffragette stories. Actually, I forgot to mention, because suffragettes actually bombed the prison on December the 18th, 1913. There was a house nearby, actually, that row of houses to the kind of this side, although it's all changed, because the prison was rebuilt, so that's why it looks different, in the 1970s. Number 12 Dalmeny Avenue was owned by a suffragette, and they bombed the prison wall and blew a big hole in it, and the police, looking for clues, only found a length of ribbon and some blonde hair, and they never got any more evidence, but they suspected it was suffragettes, and they thought they'd probably put the ribbon there basically to say it was us and you're never going to catch us. They didn't get to the buildings because, as I have to go a long way back, but as you can probably see, the walls were a long way from the building, so they didn't actually get there. But it's quite interesting. So we've been doing this project on Holloway Prison, exploring all these stories up to the present day, and if you are interested, I've got some postcards left out the back, and if you know anything about Holloway Prison and would like to come and talk to me, then that's also very welcome.
I have to own up, I've known Ross for a number of years, and I've always known what passion she has when she comes to do any particular project. I was there when she did the King and Country exhibition, which I hope everybody saw at the Jewish Museum, which was fantastic, and this is just another development of the wonderful way she can actually bring something to life. It's great to hear the overall views on how the suffragette movement developed, but in particular how it affected the Jewish community and the opposition and the tensions which were occurring throughout. And I love the idea of what happened to the US End synagogue. You may not know it, but we have a rabbi here, or an ex-rabbi from the US End, and he may have been the one guilty of doing, being involved in it at the time. And also, a number of people who did get involved at various levels, and also doing all the other things especially about Holloway Prison and the force feeding and all these elements. It all came to life. I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll come again. Thank you very much. I don't know how you're going to get this home. You'll have to see.